I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with Rohulamin Quander. He is a retired senior administrative law judge. He's also an esteemed author with a strong heritage tracing back to the 1670s in the American colonies. He is a diligent guardian of his family's legacy. The judge founded the Quander Historical and Educational Society, highlighting the enduring strength of one of America's oldest documented families through racially imposed obstacles. His most recent book, The Quanders Since 1684, An Enduring African-American Legacy, presents the remarkable journey of his ancestors, celebrating their triumphs and underlining the historical significance of their experiences from an African-American perspective. We're delighted to have the judge join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Pro Isle Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel. Judge, thanks so much for being our guest today on Spotlight.
Thank you. So delighted to be here.
This is quite an epic tale of an American family that's been here since the beginning and beyond, before the founding of America. When did you become aware of your family's legacy? And tell us how you did the research to document all that you've put in this book.
Well, I'm a native Washingtonian. The family has been in the region of Washington, D.C., in Virginia and Maryland, definitely from the 1680s, but we discovered a document that listed us in the 1670s, did not provide any detail. However, so we have been here all that time. Now, as a student at Howard University here in Washington, D.C., and then Howard University School of Law, I went to my first Quander family reunion in 1968 and met a lot of relatives that I never knew before. And from that point, while I was a student in law school, getting into legal research and other things like that, my interest was piqued. Well, where did we come from? How long have we been here? What documents are there to support things that people said, or maybe to refute things that they said, or add something more to a little bit of snippet of what they said? And I began to research in the Hall of Records in Annapolis, Maryland, and in the Fairfax County Courthouse Archive section. And I began to uncover wills, deeds, suits, tax records, various things that opened up and created a greater legacy than I knew before. And also, we have a very unique history because Quander ancestors were enslaved to George Washington at his Mount Vernon plantation. And under the provisions of his last will and testament, there were arrangements provided for their eventual freedom. Subsequently, and in more recent times, we have discovered that other Washington family members had other Quander surnamed individuals in enslavement. And how we found that was going into some of the not manumission records, but those two, but some of the ships manifest as people were shipped south to New Orleans and Mississippi in the 1830s, even the 1820s, and Quander names showed up. And when we backtracked it, where did these people come from? Lo and behold, they came from right up here in Fairfax County and in Prince George's County and in the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. And we're presently on a search to see if we can find some of those relatives now who were snatched away 200 years ago and may not even know of their being descended from the Quander family lineage. That's a task that we have taken on at this time.
Amazing. So the very first Quanders were slaves to George Washington?
Well, I wouldn't say the very first.
Right, but in the United States.
But along the way, we're not exactly sure when and how. Some of his purchases, his and other members of the Washington family obtained surname Quander people. And so, yes, that legacy of that raises the profile of the family name to a very high position. But slavery is slavery.
Yeah.
And we have struggled and faced it and try to overcome it as best we can. When I wrote this book, I was talking about American history, American history from a perspective, an African-American perspective, one. And secondly, I want people to know there was a lot more American history than the founding fathers and founding mothers. my aim in telling this story was to tell people what else was going on. What were some of the ordinary people who also happened to be Black, who also happened to be either slave or free? What was going on in their lives that were part of the building blocks of what made this nation what this nation is? So that was the uniqueness of why this story is significantly different from just saying the story of an African-American family or an American family. It has a lot of twists and turns in it.
Now, you mentioned that some of the Quanders were enslaved to George Washington. From my readings of George Washington, he was troubled by the institution of slavery. He treated some of the slaves quite well. Like you said, slavery is slavery, so I'm not excusing anything. But he actually had, slaves ride with him as companions and friends, it seems. He had promised to release or give liberty to his Quander family slaves. Was that agreement ever fulfilled?
Yes and no. I wouldn't use the word friend. Friendly is better than the word friend. Trusted advisors, right hand, etc. People like Frank Lee and Billy Lee, yes, one a cook, one is a livery man, so to speak, or manservant. Washington cared about his enslaved, true, but he didn't care enough, as far as I'm concerned. I think the historians will agree with me, to actually free them during his lifetime.
Yeah.
What he did, he provided in his will. He had 500 plus over the control of enslaved Africans over the course of his lifetime. But on the day of his death, there were 317 still there. Others, sold away, passed away, whatever, given away. So 317. And in his will, he provided for those who were under his control to be free, but not until Martha died, allegedly because he didn't want to break up families. I'm not saying that was true, because he did break up families in other circumstances. So she was frightened that they wanted her dead, and they did. That's known. That they said, well, maybe she'll hurry up and die. We might even help her. Right. So she, knowing that he had arranged to let them go upon her death, she elected to free them on the first anniversary of George Washington's death. So he died December 14th, 1799. So December 14th, 1800, I guess, she announced that as of January 1st, 1801, they would be let go. So those, and there were 123 of them, they were free, and free. And then those that came with her in her dower from her Custis family, she had a life interest in them, they were returned to the Custis family. And then there were some that were rented, and they were returned to the person they were rented from. Now, those who were Martha Washington's dower, they weren't free. They went to what became Arlington House, and their children and grandchildren ended up, some of them enslaved to Robert E. Lee, because his wife, Robert E. Lee's wife, was Mary Anna Randolph Custis. Lee was Robert E. Lee's wife, and Martha Washington's great-granddaughter. So they were still enslaved until emancipation, some of them. And those that were of the Quander group that were freed, they were turned out freed. They had to make a way for themselves. Some did very well. And it's upon that progeny and that success that we have continued to build the current generation of Quanders. And then those who built were an inspiration to some of the other Quanders who were not so fortunate as to get their freedom at that time. But it was still an inspiration to see that others of your family are moving forward, and perhaps I can join them. And that's a culmination of much of the success that the Quander family has accumulated over the generation to the present time.
Yeah, I think what's truly important in your book is that it connects the past and the present quite well. That we don't really have to go back that far in the history of our young nation to see the impact of slavery, and beyond slavery, the impact of overt racism. So is that part of your goal, to let people know how close this issue is to many African Americans living today in the United States?
Absolutely. It is not only to be an inspiration to African Americans who are living today to see how incrementally we have come using, despite stumbling blocks, turning them into stepping stones,
right?
Despite lemons, turning that into lemonade, We've gotten to the point where we now have, for example, we have 4 generals all living in the family, the only African-American family in the United States with 4 generals, 3 of whom went to West Point, and 2 of whom were the number 2 man commandant at West Point at one time or another. We have that. We have the first president of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, Quander family member. We've been featured in the Smithsonian 3 times. We've been part of a very important exhibit at Mount Vernon called Lives Bound Together, Slavery, George Washington's Mount Vernon. We were there in that exhibit for 5 years. So we have 4 streets named Quander, one in Washington, D.C., one in Bowie, Maryland, one in Prince William County, Maryland, and one in Fairfax County, Maryland. All of those speak for themselves. Now, we're not bragging.
Right.
We are saying building. This is how, step at a time, 3 or 4 steps forward, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 back, but the focus, the determination has always been there and continues. We are getting ready now for our 100th Quander family reunion in 2025. We're already planning for it. So ours is to be an inspiration, not only within our own family, but to Americans, Black, white, Asian, whatever their ethnicity and history, to realize that we have struggled. We haven't made it, we are still making it. And that is our message. We're not special. We are among others. There are many like us. We don't claim to be the oldest Black family. We are one of the oldest Black families in America. So it's all building upon what has gone before and the ancestors who've done before. And we're continuing on that mission.
It's fascinating. Do you know the etymology of the name Quander?
Well, the name Quander it's part of a Fanti language group. A lot of people ask that question. In English, quack is QU in the Anglo languages. In the Akan languages, qua is KW. So qua in Ghana is Quander. Qua in English is Quander. And what we believe happened, we can't prove it, we think it happened. The Amaquando family of Ghana, West Africa, a Fanti group, that's a recognized name. And over time, when it started out being spelled KW, it is a little bit morphed into QU now as language is more written. And what we believe happened is that the original forebears asked the name, replied Amaquando, which to untrained ears on this side of the world, Amaquando, I'm Quando. So in the first records that appear in the Maryland colony, it is Quando, Quando. The H has fallen away. I am, or the is not there. But as we meet more and more people from West Africa, particularly that region, they recognize the name immediately. And that's how I found out when I was about 17 at Howard University here in Washington, D.C. And the students were calling me Mr. Quando, Mr. Amaquando. I didn't know what they were talking about. I'd heard it more than once. And one day I said to somebody, why are people calling me this? I've had this happen before. And the student said, well, you obviously don't know the origin of your name. So I didn't. And I talked to an older person in the family and said, well, we heard that back there somewhere, and they're pointing back over the shoulder. We heard our name used to be Quando. Oh, that was a clue, because that was in the records. But in the census of 1800, we see the name that always fallen off, even though it's in the records. It's become ER in a couple of spots, an ERS also. So that explains, it sort of ties together how it has morphed in over the time to where we are today. And the question we raised is, should we go back and change it again? We said, no, we're going to leave well enough alone.
Exactly. Very interesting. I think a lot of names were slaughtered by the different officials, whether you're Irish or Italian, they got it wrong often.
Yes.
Or African, as the case might be. Was DNA helpful, the ancestry DNA type tests helpful in identifying the Quander clan?
The answer has to be no, in the sense that we were well on our way towards establishing this before that came up. Now, where DNA has come in, it has shown relatives that we didn't know we had who did not have the name Quander have now shown up, because a number of people here in the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area, and they can be around the country or any place in the world for that matter, have discovered that they have a multi-times removed great-grandparent who happens to be from the Quander group from Maryland, Virginia, or DC. We have picked up a number of people that way. But when this process started, some of the older people, they were carrying this from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. I didn't get into it until 1968, and we didn't have any of that. So the bulk of my research was concluded well before the year 2000. And it was the digging into old dusty records with magnifying glasses and looking at fading ink to see what the name was and what county and who they were married to and burial records, etc. So this is the blood, sweat, and tears approach.
Amazing. Well, that's the old-fashioned way of doing it, and the blood, sweat, and tears approach, like you said, it's quite amazing. 2025, you said, is the 100th Quander family reunion.
Yes.
What's that going to look like? I got a feeling it's going to be more than 6 people. How many folks are you expecting? Are the ranks growing as people do their ancestry DNA and say, hey, I'm a Quander? And how is your historical society dedicated to your family's legacy helping with all of this?
Well, the Quander Historical and Educational Society is separate from the Quander Family Reunion, which is our Virginia group, and the Quanders United, which is our Maryland, DC group. I should say the Virginia, Pennsylvania group. But the Historical and Educational Society is set up to separately identify, create, preserve, document, preserve, whatever, educate, and share the legacy, to do it in an academic, nonprofit manner, so that people will be able to go and look and find the history and records pretty much in 1 or 2 places. And those records are stored partially at Howard University in the Moreland Spin Gun Research Center and in the DC History Center, which is the Center of History for the District of Columbia. The idea is to not have them in somebody's basement or file cabinet and get thrown out when that person passes on, because that's happened in the family already. But now, as far as the upcoming reunion, it's hard to say. The Quander family's attendance at reunions, like other families too, is like an accordion, it expands and contracts. And now that we're looking forward towards the 100th, we're beginning to have people say, oh, I came 25 years ago, or I never came. But now they're saying, I think it's a good idea that we should come together. We have not had a reunion of this anticipated magnitude in terms of significance since our reunion in 1984. Wherein we observed 300 years of documented presence. That's before we discovered the record of the 1670s. And the reunion of 1984, 300th anniversary, also at Howard University, it brought a lot of people together. We even expected Vice President Bush to attend, except something came up at the last minute and he didn't. But we had all coverage from ABC, CBS, NBC, Radio France International, BBC, etc. And now that we're coming up to the 100th Quander family reunion, I'm sure there'll be quite a bit of interest in pressing that. But in the meantime, there's a lot of work to do, because we have a family whose legacy is not unique, but very important to protect and document and share. That's what it's all about: protect, document, and share. Because we want people to understand that whatever we have done, they can do something significant in their own families. Maybe not as much. They may even be able to do more, but they have to get started. They have to have a sense of organization and structure. And as we progress, we have people falling by the wayside who've given up, whether it be career-wise, job-wise, whatever it is. But we also have a strong focus of those who have kept their eye on the prize, whatever that prize is. And for African Americans, it is often a big struggle, because we've started off in the places of disadvantage. And it's easy when you're coming from a place of disadvantage over a sustained period of time, it's easy to give up. Yeah. But you've got to understand that there are those who have not given up. And when we look and we see those who have said, and still I rise, this is what we are trying to do. This is my 4th book, and all 4 of my books have been based upon promotion and stepping up and accomplishment. My own first book on my dad, he was a type 1 diabetic that didn't expect him to live to be 10 years old. Insulin rescued him, and his life was one of triumph. The Alpha Kappa Alpha, Nellie Quander, was the first national president, and the organization now has initiated maybe 300,000 members since 1908. Of course, that's a long time. But her life was so stellar with the suffragist movement, with Black history. She was involved in so many things. myself, my journey, and my fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, governed by manhood, scholarship, perseverance, uplift, complemented by the addition of good service. All of this was the underpinning for the current book, which is right here. And my wife painted the cover. She's a professional artist.
That's
and
beautiful.
She painted the cover for this book, The Quanders in 1684, An Enduring African-American Legacy, which
Wonderful.
can be found through, of course, through Pro Isle Publishing. Can be found on the internet or Amazon. Or you can go to quanderquality.com and dig around a little bit, and the web page will come up. One can order the book. If you get it directly through me, it'll be personally autographed. If you get it through one of the online sources, of course, you get it. Same price, but it won't be autographed.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. Protect, document, and share. You've done that with this book. Once again, the name of the book is The Quanders Since 1684, An Enduring African-American Legacy. You've heard the man. He's as eloquent a writer as he is articulate a speaker, and it's been a true pleasure speaking with him today. Literally, I could talk to you all day. There's so many topics I want to go through. Perhaps another time, sir. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed this immensely, and I hope that when the public is reviewing and seeing this, that they will be inspired to go out and order several copies, place them in all the libraries and every place else. That it's not, as I said, this is not African-American history or Black history. This is American history. American history.
Agreed. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.
Thank you very much.